bypass your cravings to stop smoking. Introduction. Hello and welcome to this free ebook all about stopping smoking, getting past your cravings as easily as possible and staying well clear of smoking once you have stopped. I have condensed and included a lot of useful information and proven techniques to help you quit with as little mood swinging and sweating as possible. Enjoy. Part 1. How hard is it to stop? How hard is it to stop smoking? Is a question nearly every smoker asks themselves after they've been smoking for a few years and the novelty's worn off. In fact, we usually enjoy it the most when we are teenagers and not allowed to. But when the not allowed to phase passes and no one gives a toss anymore whether we smoke or not, then most of us see it as a habit that's holding us back, both physically and financially. But just like everything else that's bad for us and negative, it can be removed from our lives, with a little know-how, and the fact that you are even reading this means you're already over halfway there because you want to stop. And once you've stopped smoking, you'll be able to throw the window open and take in all those smells you couldn't before: petrol, dog shit, and other people's smoke. One of the best things you can do to get rid of cigarettes for good is to be harsh with yourself and say, I'm going to feel tense and irritated and generally not quite myself for the next 2 to 4 weeks. This is of course a bad way to feel, and why would anyone self-impose this? The smoker inside you will ask, and the best answer I can think of is that feeling irritated for 4 weeks is a million times better than developing one or more of the medical nasties that no one in the right mind wants to get. I'm 31 and I stopped smoking 6 years ago. It wasn't easy, and for the first week or so you're having an almost constant argument with yourself about whether to have a cigarette or not. This is just the nicotine trying to trick you, and you will actually notice when this starts to ease off. As soon as it does, you will realize that this is actually doable and you will feel instantly better about deciding to stop. Also, if you use even 1 or 2 of the techniques covered in this ebook, your cravings will have their sting removed. Once you have stopped for about 2 or 3 months, you'll wonder why you ever smoked in the first place. This is a great stage to be at because you've pretty much beaten it. One last thing that you need to fully understand is that you need to avoid all alcohol in your first 2 months of stopping. Indeed, avoid any situation where you'll be drinking and surrounded by smokers, because 2 things will happen. 1, they will offer you cigarettes. 2, some of them will make fun of you for stopping because you stopping highlights their inability to. You don't need either of these things when you're trying to get past the first few weeks, or indeed the first 2 months. So to recap, it is difficult at first, but if you stick to it you will basically become a stronger, healthier version of yourself, and you'll have more money. Visit www.letsgetsmokefree.com to learn more. Part 2. Take it or leave it. It will help you to stop if you figure out what kind of smoker you are. There are 6 types for you to choose from, so have a look through the information below to help you come to a decision. 1. Part-time/social smoker. Hardly anyone falls into this category, although lots of smokers wish they did, or tell themselves they do. However, if you are in this category, you may feel that your part-time smoking poses no serious harm to you or anyone else. You could be overlooking warning signs that your occasional smoking is turning into a habit, especially if you tend to smoke a little more when you are stressed or socializing, because that's one of cigarettes' sneakiest tricks. We constantly underestimate it because it's small and it's quick, but a 2 or 3 a day habit can easily warp into a 6 or 8 a day one. And all it really takes to get the upper hand on you is a few extra days of stress or parties, which can pop up at any time. If you're a part-time social smoker, you might as well do a quick swap to a non-smoker to save yourself a harder time quitting later on. 2. The smoker who can stop anytime. Except now. This one's all too familiar, and most of us who have smoked or still smoke will land at least halfway into this category, if not all the way in it. The thought process behind this one is a perfect example of the way a person can distort logic to be able to keep doing what he or she wants to do. It goes something like this: I'll just finish this last packet, then I'll stop, or the famous I'll stop tomorrow, or even I'll keep smoking just now but I'll stop at New Year. And while reading it sounds a little bit funny because we can see the obvious self-deception, it is actually very dangerous because most people who get into the habit of appeasing their more sensible side with this bullshit end up still smoking 2, 3 or even 10 years down the line. And only stop when they've considerably weakened themselves and burnt heaps of money. Yes, this one is a long wait for a train that isn't coming. 3. The emotional smoker. For those of us that have more extreme shifts in mood, for whatever reason, dealing with nicotine withdrawal can be all the more difficult because what for someone else is a slight downer can seem to you like a plummeting spiral. The flip side of this is that once you do get free of the withdrawal stages, you'll feel much better about your accomplishment. And let's face it, if you know you're going to be having strong mood shifts, it's better to behave in a way that creates really good moods as opposed to really bad ones. If you think you are this type of smoker, you probably smoke to avoid negative feelings, situations and arguments. For you, smoking has become something to run to when things are happening that you either don't like or have no control over. The challenge for you is to become comfortable with yourself when you're not smoking, and also you have to ask yourself if being around something or someone is so annoying to me that it forces me to want to smoke, is it really worth being around that? I would guess the answer to this question would be a big fat no. Take it or leave it, part 2. 4. The smoker who worries about weight gain. If you are a smoker who is afraid of putting on weight, you are probably using cigarettes some of the time at least, to keep your hunger at bay, and you may be worried that if you stop you will get really fat, really fast. However, you would actually be better being a slightly heavier non-smoker than a stick-thin smoker. People who smoke aren't thin in a healthy way, no. They are thin because their body is working twice as hard as normal to get rid of all the poison coming in with the cigarette. So you're using up all your proteins and minerals and fuel reserves twice as fast. To put it even more simply, continuing to smoke is dragging you closer to becoming a skeleton than you are probably comfortable with. And besides, quitting smoking doesn't automatically mean you have to start eating bucket loads of junk food, as we will cover later in part 12. 5. The alcohol connection. Some of us fall into the trap of using alcohol and tobacco to deal with the normal day-to-day problems that occur. Unfortunately, this usually has the opposite effect and weakens our ability to deal with problems unless we have a drink or cigarette close to hand. If something creates tension in you and is a pain in the neck in general, it's still going to be that way whether you have a cigarette or a drink in your hand. All that introducing the chemical does is slightly fog over and obscure the problem, and while this seems better in the short term, it is actually more than useless, because the next time you come across a problem without the help of drink or nicotine, it will seem like a much bigger deal than it really is. 6. Situation smoker. This type of smoker reaches for a cigarette when they feel pressure or when they are on a deadline and need to get a certain task finished. They then stop until they are under pressure or deadline again. Also, the situational smoker will smoke while engaging in certain leisure activities, like meeting a friend for a drink or playing snooker or golf. It's easier for a situational smoker to tell themselves they can stop any time they like, or that their habit isn't too bad for their health. It's also just as easy, if not easier, for their habit to grow legs and become a full-time problem. The indecision of this can be the worst thing. You're never quite free of smoking and totally healthy, nor are you ever so bogged down with tar that you get a health scare and have to stop. You just float about in the middle for years, getting slowly more dependent on cigarettes. If you only want to smoke in certain situations, are those situations really worth being in? Visit www.letsgetsmokefree.com to learn more. Part 3. Today's better than tomorrow. One of the worst excuses I've heard, and uttered myself, is the dreaded and famous, "I'll stop tomorrow." This little beauty is usually spoken about 3 seconds after the smoker in question has extinguished the last cigarette of the night. You never hear a smoker say this when they haven't had one for 6 hours and it's only 3 in the afternoon. In the land of quitting smoking, tomorrow's always just out of reach and never quite gets here. Another excuse that is similar but not quite as far into fantasy land as, "I'll stop tomorrow," is, "It'll cut down, and then I will stop." For some reason this very rarely works. It always starts with the very best of intentions, 6 a day for a week, then 4 a day the next week, and so on. But instead of going 6 4 2 0, it usually goes 6 6 8 11 14. So this one is just as useless as the first one. Quitting smoking would be bad for my health because it would disrupt my exercise routine. I walk to the shop to buy my cigarettes. Another good, or bad, one is, smoking relaxes me. We all know how relaxing it is to rake through all the junk drawers in the house looking for your emergency cigarette, which you already smoked, because you have run out and don't get paid until tomorrow. Yes, very relaxing indeed. This reason's rubbish too. You only feel slightly relaxed when you smoke because the cigarette is topping up the nicotine levels in your body and postponing the dreaded withdrawal for another 20 minutes or so, the nicotine levels that wouldn't be there in the first place if we didn't smoke. So basically, if you're going to quit tomorrow, today's going to last a bit longer than a normal day, probably about 3 years long. The best thing to do is give the power of now. Try and stop today. Read on. The next bit's the worst, then it gets easier. Part 4. Withdrawal symptoms. Here it comes. Hold on to your lug nuts. It's time for an overhaul. Jim Carrey the Mask. This bit is grim. While you can avoid some of the pain in the ass of it with various techniques, it is still going to be difficult. The only good thing about it is that it reaches its worst and most annoying at around the 4-day mark. So if you make it past this point, then it has done its worst and it's only going to get easier. But those first 4 days seem a lot longer at the time. We will have a look at what to expect just now so you know what you're in for, and hopefully you won't be bowled over and go back to smoking. The first symptom I want to warn you about is irritation. Little things that you would usually swear under your breath at and move on or not even notice at all will distort and warp into the most annoying problems you have ever come across, almost as teeth grinding as the infamous and pointless Rubik's Cube. The same is going to apply for people that usually slightly annoy you. Try and avoid anyone like this, especially in the 4-day danger zone, because you might end up shoving them into moving traffic. The next symptom to watch out for is low moods. These can appear out of nowhere and hang about for different amounts of time depending on the person, and depending on what you do when they pop up. If you mope about and indulge them, they'll probably last longer than if you go and float about in your local swimming pool or go for a walk. But just like the cravings, they fade out and reduce in intensity. Sleeping difficulty is another one. You might have trouble falling asleep or staying asleep, or both. Brilliant. I hear you say, but this one's not all bad. When I quit, I used to really look forward to finally getting to sleep because you are getting through about 7 hours of stopping smoking while unconscious, and when you wake up you'll feel better and you'll be that much closer to being free. Also, if you were a heavy smoker, after about 2 weeks of stopping, your body realizes it's not getting any more, and every morning you will cough up a little bit of tar and mucus. It's usually dark brown with little black bits in it. A bit disgusting but also satisfying because you can see the effects of your efforts and at the same time realize what you were doing to your body for all those years. Also, with sleeping while going through the worst parts of withdrawal, you may get the odd warpy dream or two about smoking and maybe even wake up suddenly a bit sweaty. This is just the poison coming out of your system and your subconscious mind going through the motions it's used to. Just stick the light on, drink some cold water and read or watch TV for a while. You will soon fall back to sleep. And this weird dream thing only crops up in the first week. The last one is trouble concentrating. This is temporary and not worth worrying about. Since you're going to be constantly concentrating on not smoking, which translates as saving your own life, you're not expected to be able to defuse bombs or crack safes. Allow yourself some easy time in this first difficult 4 days to a week of withdrawal. Your main priority is getting clean from smoke. This is why it's really good to time your first 4 or so days with holidays from work or school or whatever, especially if you've got a stressful job, bomb diffuser or something. Visit www.letsgetsmokefree.com to learn more. Part 5. Hypnosis versus nicotine. If you have tried to stop smoking before, either by going cold turkey or with nicotine replacement, and failed, then using a good hypnosis program is that extra bit of help that will tip the scales in your favor and allow you to succeed. Did you know that stopping smoking with hypnosis has a much higher success rate than other methods, and for most people it only takes one session with a hypnotist to permanently stop? Most of us have heard the saying, "It's all in the head," before, and this is certainly true of quitting cigarettes. The physical part of the craving only lasts between 1 and 2 seconds. It is the "I want to smoke now" thoughts that this craving creates that usually hang about and drive the person who has stopped back to smoking. This is where hypnosis gets right to the root of the problem and helps you destroy your cravings. During hypnosis, the person that wants to quit is placed in a relaxed state of mind through guided imagery and sound. While in this relaxed state you will be more open to suggestions, and the hypnotist or audio program you have chosen will implant ideas about smoking, such as the healthy effects of quitting smoking, how much better you will feel, look and smell, and how much money you will save. The best part about stopping smoking with hypnosis is that you won't have to go through the first 2 to 3 weeks of stopping like a bear with a sore head and a thorn in all 4 paws. Because through the hypnotic suggestion your mind will be thinking about the positive points of quitting instead of shouting, "Feed me smoke." And this greatly reduces the need for constant iron willpower on your part. Another great benefit about this method is you can strengthen your resolve at home. This is done by going to the place in your home you find the most relaxing and placing yourself in a relaxed state with deep breathing exercises you can learn from a good audio self-hypnosis program, and listening again to the suggestions in the audio program. If you have already visited a hypnotist first, then reinforcing it at home will double your chances of success. It is also far cheaper than other methods like nicotine replacement. Part 6. 6 Self-Hypnosis Tips to Beat Cravings. Hello, welcome to Part 4, a simple guide to self-hypnosis, which is a proven method to destroy your cravings. Let's get started. Get yourself comfortable, either sitting or lying down. Don't cross your arms or legs. Focus on a point in front of you and let your breaths become slow and deep, and as you continue to focus on your point, this can be anything from a scuff on the wallpaper to a certain button on the television, imagine bringing it closer to you. You can now let your eyes close slowly while continuing to take slow and deep breaths. Now scan down your muscles, starting with your neck, shoulders and back. These 2 are especially important because a lot of unnoticed tension builds here throughout the day. And right down to your feet, and imagine each group of muscles you scan on the way down going loose and relaxed and becoming warm and heavy. Say to yourself, "My whole body is warm, loose and heavy." Once you have relaxed all your body, imagine a door in front of you and mentally walk through it. This door leads to a relaxing, calming place. This can be a real-world location you relate to calm positive feelings or your own personal Narnia. What's important is that you feel safe and relaxed, warm, loose and heavy. You will now be in a hypnotic state and much more open to the positive suggestions you are going to recite to yourself. Once you are in this hypnotic state and your breathing is still deep and slow, which pretty much takes care of itself, you can start to recite your personal affirmations. These act as commands to the subconscious mind which it will strive to achieve. For the purpose of what we are talking about today, it might be something like, "I'm sick of smoking and I'm ready to stop. I feel better when I don't smoke." Smoking doesn't fill a void, it creates it, and you can make up a few others while you're in the moment. Enjoy this state for as long as you want to, and when you have finished you can count yourself out of the trance. You can do this by telling yourself that you will feel more and more awake with each number you count from 1 to 10, until you are fully awake at the count of 10. When you open your eyes you should feel calm and relaxed. This is partly because of the deep breathing you have just done, but also because you have given your mind, your actual mind, a relaxing break from the conscious world where it is constantly skittering from one thing to the next in the speedy way that only our modern laser quasar text message world can provide. You will feel a little different, in a good way, and with regular practice, once a day is enough, you should find yourself experiencing less and less cravings. You should also find it becomes easier over time to get into deeper levels of trance as you become more experienced. Like most things, practice will perfect your self-hypnosis. Once a day for 10 minutes is fine. To view an excellent self-hypnosis video, visit www.letsgetsmokefree.com. Part 7. The benefits of NLP revealed. For some reason one of the best, if not the best way, to quit is often not mentioned, overlooked or disregarded by the person who would benefit from it the most, you. This method is called neuro-linguistic programming or NLP, and it is sometimes overlooked because some media reports labeled it as New Age nonsense, and this has unfortunately stuck in people's minds. Yet many top professionals in everything from sports to the stock market either practice it or at least understand some of the basic techniques and use them to their advantage. It is in fact a very powerful method for change, in this case changing from smoking to non-smoking without ridiculous amounts of cravings and mood swings. The main focus of NLP is replicating the most effective behavior patterns in any field. For example, Tiger Woods in golf or Richard Branson in business, and teaching you how to replace a part of your behavior, which is bad or detrimental, with behavior from the best role model in the field. By learning a few simple techniques you can greatly change the quality of your life. The first principle of NLP is to know what outcome you want. This is very important because many people have not thought about what they definitely want. Others have no idea what they want but know what they don't want. Their life becomes about moving away from those things they don't want. NLP focuses on the importance of moving towards those things you want. Once the outcome you want is clear in your mind, you can begin to move towards it. The second principle is to have sufficient sensory acuity, clear understanding. This means to know if you are moving towards or away from your outcome. This is achieved by reading your behavior to observe if you are in the desired state for moving towards your goal. The third principle is flexibility of behavior. This means to vary your behavior until you get the response you want. If your current behavior is leading towards your goal, then you should continue. If it isn't, then you should do something else. The fourth and final principle of NLP is to take action now. This is a very important step because when someone says, "I'll do it tomorrow," either to themselves or others, tomorrow usually means never, as we discussed earlier. The key benefit to you is that you can begin to move towards the things that are important to you in life. Today that might be becoming a non-smoker, next month it might be creating more money for yourself or your loved ones. What you want is definitely within your reach by adjusting your behavior and identifying your goals, and sometimes it only takes a small positive adjustment today to get a very big positive response a few months down the road. Part 8. Kill your cravings with the swish technique. Here is a technique that can help you overcome your craving for cigarettes with NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, but first let's take a quick look at the history of NLP. After graduating from the University of San Francisco, with a bachelor degree in psychology, and then serving as a captain in the U.S. Special Forces during the Cold War in Europe, John Grinder moved on to work for a U.S. intelligence agency. He then returned to college to study linguistics, the scientific study of human language, in the late 60s and received his Ph.D. In 71. In 1972, while he was working as assistant professor in the linguistics faculty at the University of California, he was approached by Richard Bandler for help in modeling Gestalt therapy, at the time an experimental therapy which focused on the individual's experience in the present moment, and this led them to model or copy behavioral patterns of Fritz Perls, the creator of Gestalt therapy, Virginia Sitar, a leading figure in family therapy, and Milton Erickson, who was a leading figure in hypnosis and psychiatry. This work was the foundation of what would become neuro-linguistic programming. Richard Bandler and John Grinder began hosting practice groups. It was here they were able to practice their newly discovered behavior patterns and teach them to the group's participants. They also used the information gained from these practice groups to publish several books. It was during this period that a creative group of students and psychotherapists formed around Grinder and Bandler, and all of them made valuable contributions to the growing field of neuro-linguistic programming. In the 1980s the group separated and continued with NLP in their own directions. The method used to combat addictions and cravings is known as the swish technique. This is a valuable technique for managing your own thinking, states, and behaviors. And each time you use the swish, you are training yourself to redirect your mind from negative habits or behaviors to more positive ones. Visit www.letsgetsmokefree.com to find out more. How to use the swish is as follows. 1. Select and visualize a replacement behavior. First, select your replacement behavior. Ask yourself, what do I want to do instead of smoking another stinking cigarette? Once you have selected the replacement behavior, going for a walk for example, visualize yourself acting out this behavior as if you were looking at a square, clear photograph of yourself doing it. 2. Find the trigger for the unwanted behavior. Ask yourself, what occurs just before the unwanted behavior, smoking, begins? And this time you want to visualize a clear, square photograph of what happens just before you engage in the unwanted behavior. For example, you might visualize a picture of yourself just sitting back from the table after finishing a meal. 3. Put the replacement in the corner of the unwanted image. Visualize your replacement photograph, going for a walk, as a small postage-sized image in the bottom corner of your trigger photograph, sitting back from the table after finishing a meal. 4. Swish the two images. Now you want to make both photographs swap places in your mind's eye at the same time. Have the negative image become smaller and at the same time have the positive replacement image become larger and closer until it replaces the negative image completely. Imagine a swish sound as you do this. 5. Clear your mind. After each swish round, blank your mind, fully. Think of something else or visualize your favorite color. Breathing deeply as you do this, since some people tend to hold their breath while concentrating on doing the swish. It is crucial to the success of the swish to clear your mind or turn your attention outside before you do each next round. 6. Practice 5 to 7 times. Repeat steps 3 to 5 up to about 7 times until you have difficulty in maintaining the negative or trigger photograph. It can seem a little blurry and unclear at first, depending on your ability to visualize. However, if you keep practicing your swish, it will become crystal clear and will help you to exchange your trigger behavior that happens just before you smoke for your better replacement behavior. Part 9. The power of anchoring. Stopping smoking is a subject that's usually approached with a sense of grim foreboding, when in reality it's one of the best changes you can undergo. In the last chapter, 1 covered the NLP swish technique for dealing with nicotine cravings and changing unwanted behavior patterns. In this article I'd like to tell you about a technique called anchoring. This technique involves anchoring thoughts and feelings when you perform a specific action, such as squeezing your thumb and finger together. The anchor can be a sound or a gesture, it's totally up to you. So in the instance of a smoker who is quitting, if they crave a cigarette, then by performing the anchor action the craving is relieved, Below are the steps to follow to successfully practice the anchoring technique of chaining one positive and one negative anchor together. By doing so, whenever you start to feel the negative state, it will flow to the positive state. Step 1. Get yourself in a calm and relaxed state. This is easily done by getting yourself in a quiet, comfortable place where you won't be disturbed. Either sit or lie down in a comfortable position, without crossing your arms or legs, and begin to take slow, deep breaths, and with your mind scan down over all your muscles, loosening and relaxing any that you feel tension in, usually the shoulder and neck muscles. Slowly close your eyes and let yourself relax. Don't try hard to relax, because this will keep your mind in a state of effort. Just let it come naturally with your slow, deep breaths. Step 2. When you feel at your most relaxed, do your first, positive, anchor. Pressing your thumb and forefinger together is a good one, but it's up to you. Step 3. Open your eyes and break the state and repeat what you've just done a few times. Step 4. Now close your eyes and visualize yourself really badly craving a cigarette. You've not had one for hours and something's just really annoyed you, and this makes you want one even more. Experience the sense of tension and frustration. Step 5. At the peak of feeling frustrated, do your second, negative, anchor, allowing yourself to do the anchor and remain in the frustrated state for 20 seconds or so. Step 6. Repeat a few times. Step 7. Now chain both anchors together. Start by visualizing yourself almost screaming out for a cigarette, then do anchor number 2. Visualize yourself as you start to feel tense and short-tempered, then change to anchor 1, suddenly you feel a calm and relaxed feeling. Bingo! Always make sure your positive anchor is stronger than your negative one. Anchoring is one of the best ways to stop smoking, because with a little practice you can turn your annoying cravings into a feeling of calmness. Head over to www.letsgetsmokefree.com to learn more. Part 10. Turn on the tap. Tapping is another self-hypnosis technique that gets rid of negative thoughts and feelings. Every time we have a negative thought, it creates a negative feeling, the mind-body connection hard at work. For example, thinking about an unpaid debt could make you feel insecure and not in control. Obviously, negative thoughts and feelings are no good for us, and most of the things we worry about never come to pass anyway. We think about negative stuff more than positive because our survival mechanisms are over-anxious to do their job. But nowadays walking to the local Starbucks doesn't involve escaping from stampeding mastodons, woolly mammoths, or tussling with Viking raiders. Yes, worrying about stuff has become more trouble than it's worth. So this is an excellent way to save yourself anguish, and more importantly not think about having a cigarette every 2 minutes, then feeling tense because you can't. Step 1. Start by tapping the karate chop point, located on the opposite side of your hand from your thumb. Tap with the 2 fingers of your right hand onto the karate chop point of your left hand. Obviously, if you are left-handed, reverse. Use the same pressure you would use tapping on a table to get a drumming sound. While tapping, you should repeat the following positive affirmation: even though I crave cigarettes, I totally and completely accept myself. Of course, this all sounds like nonsense when you first hear about it, but it's been proven to work, helping people overcome alcohol, eating, smoking and emotional problems. Step 2. Next, we tap the top of the head with the same 2 or 3 fingers, while repeating the positive affirmation. Step 3. Next, we tap on the eyebrow points, located at the start of the eyebrow, nearest the nose, while repeating our affirmation. Step 4. Next, we tap the eye points, located on the bone just past where your eye ends on the side closest to your ears, and continue repeating your affirmation. Step 5. Now we tap the under eye points, located under the eye and about even with the pupils, repeating the affirmation. Step 6. Now tap under your nose, halfway between the bottom of your nose and the top of your lip, repeating the affirmation. Step 7. Now tap the chin point, located halfway between the bottom of your lower lip and the end of your chin. Step 8. Now tap the collarbone points, located about an inch down and over towards the outside of where a man would tie his tie. Step 9. Now tap the under the arm point, located 4 inches below the armpit. Do both sides while repeating your affirmation. And to finish, do the top of the head once more to come full circle. Like I said, it can seem a little wacky at first, but this technique works really well for lots of people, and you might be one of them, so it's worth a try. You can find this technique on YouTube. Emotional Freedom Technique, EFT, Demonstration. He Pupils Part 11. Nicotine replacement. Is there any point? Let's look at the pros and cons of nicotine replacement. I'm very skeptical about patches or gums that keep your system topped up with the very substance it's supposed to be learning to do without, but this method does work for some people, and it may be right for you, so let's look into it a bit. But first, what exactly is nicotine and what does it do to our bodies? We all know what the actual smoke does: tar in the lungs, cough, out of breath, ached. But what's nicotine doing while it's skulking about inside us, apart from making us act like a 5-year-old that's lost his sweets? Once it is absorbed through the cigarette, the nicotine quickly reaches the central nervous system. When it gets there, it causes a few noteworthy short and long-term effects. The first short-term effect is increased heart rate and blood pressure, not very good obviously. The second short-term effect is a reduction in urine output. Not sure anyone will be too bothered about this one, but it can't be good for you. And the third is a decrease in reflex times, not very good for all manner of reasons. The long-term effects are increased risk of heart disease, coronary thrombosis and peptic ulcers. Sexy. I won't labor the point with these last 3 because we have all heard about the horrors of smoking many times over, but obviously they are things that no one's going to have on their Christmas list. So that's what nicotine gets up to when it's allowed to wander around inside you. Whether it's getting there via a lit cigarette or a nicotine patch doesn't really matter, and since you are going to have to get along without it anyway, I don't see the point of stopping with this method, unless maybe you are a very heavy smoker or you work in a busy, stressful environment and you need a few days of assistance before you really go for it and stop. But let's look at the pros and cons before we throw it out of court, just in case this one's the one for you. The first benefit of quitting with patches or gum is that it reduces the symptoms of nicotine withdrawal so that you don't go from normal to jittery maniac within about 3 hours of stopping. The second benefit is you are no longer getting all the other chemicals that you were getting while you still smoked. The third is that you now know exactly how much nicotine you are getting and you can monitor and reduce it. The downside about stopping this way is that, even though it makes the process easier, you won't be 100% stopped until you have no nicotine in your system, and a lot of people seesaw back and forth when they try and quit this way because they are still craving and relying upon nicotine. In summary, it's probably better to have those first few days being the jittery maniac, because once you get past them you will be getting truly clear of nicotine and you won't want to go back to it ever again. Visit www.letsgetsmokefree.com to find out more. Part 12. Saying goodbye to smoke without saying hello to fat. Many people either worry about gaining weight when they stop smoking or actually gain weight because they weren't aware of the possibility of this happening. It only takes a few weeks or months of comfort eating to start tipping the scales in the wrong direction, but if we know about this hurdle before we get to it, there's less chance of us falling flat on our faces. The 3 big reasons people gain weight when they quit smoking are: 1. The proteins which your body was using to repair the damage caused by smoking now get broken down for energy instead, and your system no longer has to exert itself to get rid of all the poison from the cigarette either, therefore you don't have to eat as much anymore. Most people continue to eat the amount they did when they still smoked, and quite often a bit extra out of boredom, so they gain unwanted weight fast. 2. Your system has been used to a blood sugar boost from smoking, because it flips your body into stress mode. When this hourly boost is taken away, your body senses that something isn't right, and most people compensate by reaching for the nearest sugar-filled snack, and this is obviously an express elevator to becoming overweight if you make it one of your daily rituals. 3. Sometimes people get so used to having something in their mouths that when the cigarette suddenly vanishes, something feels amiss, and they replace the cigarette with any one of the thousands of junk food snacks there are out there. I know some of you must be thinking, great, I have to quit smoking and start dieting at the same time. But I would advise against this. In the first 2 to 3 weeks of stopping, it's a good idea to let yourself eat some comforting junk. It will give you a morale boost and distract you from thinking about smoking too much. The trick is not to let the first 2 to 3 weeks morph into months, then years, because you will inflate. Here are a few suggestions to avoid this. 1. Decrease the size of your plate so it's slightly smaller. This is a simple method, but it's tried and tested. 2. Seek out some healthy snacks that you can actually stand the taste of, and try and eat some every day. They contain vitamins and minerals that will help your body to repair the damage caused by smoking, and if you're eating them, you won't be eating sugary junk. 3. If you need to compensate for not having anything in your mouth, find yourself some sugar-free gum. 4. You will definitely be getting a permanent, extra boost of energy, so now is a great time to start to do some sort of exercise. I'm not talking about 1,000 press-ups or running for miles and miles, just something light at first that gets you on your feet and moving. This will help you in a few different ways. You'll be using up the extra energy we talked about, you'll feel more relaxed and level after you exercise, and you'll start to feel stronger and younger as the weeks and months roll by. Part 13. What now? So let's say you have stopped forever this time, once and for all, finished, done, but what now? You could be finding yourself hanging out with your friends less, at least with your friends that still smoke. I mean, they are of course still your friends, but how are you supposed to just sit with them now and pleasantly talk the day away? How are you supposed to do that, when every 20 minutes their hand moves towards the overstuffed packet of cigarettes like a hungry wolf lunging at a crippled Bambi, the awkward annoying silence when they light that stinker up, the crackle of the burning tobacco, or the stench when they breathe it out all over the room is enough to drive you crazy. Don't they know how hard it was for you to quit? Are they smoking and appearing to enjoy it more on purpose? Was that a sneaky smile flashing across their face? Traitors, all of them. Of course I'm just joking, and this is an exaggeration of how we feel in this situation, hopefully, but there is also a little truth in it, isn't there? It's a pain in the backside to sit with someone who still lights up cigarettes every 5 minutes, without so much as an opened window or a switched-on fan. When you have just endured about 3 weeks of annoying cravings to stop. And this can lead to minor strains being put on a friendship, depending on the people involved of course, but you as the person who gave up should never feel like you are the one doing something wrong. No, it's not your fault they still need the rotten comfort of the smoky nipple. It's theirs, and you should never let them forget it. So we have discussed the awkwardness of sitting in your friend's company with them still smoking away, and then we came to the conclusion that we aren't the ones doing anything wrong, so the best thing to do in this situation is to flip the script on them. Phone up your pal and ask them to meet you at the local gym for an hour of weights or stamina training, or to join you for a few hours on a strenuous uphill walk. It's only fair that if they are happy to sit all relaxed in their living room or kitchen blowing smoke rings towards you while you have to feel tense and awkward, like a scientist in church, then you should be able to feel superior and laugh to yourself when they are wheezing like an asthmatic pensioner halfway up the first hill. The tables have turned, my smoky friend. Visit www.letsgetsmokefree.com to find out more. Part 14. Why on earth did I start? I guess the scenario for most of us unfolded something like this. We were between 14 and 16 and hanging around in a larger group of friends than we do today. Within that circle of yesterday there were probably some good, funny people and a few absolute knob-ends. But we were a lot more tolerant of the foolish, loud or troublesome members in those days because we were younger, and if we are honest with ourselves, sometimes we were the knob-ends too. Within our group of about 7 to 14 friends, probably about 6 or more smoked, and of course when they offered us a cigarette we would accept one, or take a few drags on theirs. Sometimes we would even ask them, "What's it like?" To which I remember the reply going something like, "The first 3 or 4 will make you feel sick, but you'll get used to it." Of course, if our body tells us, "This makes me feel sick, get it away from me," the first 4 or so times we try something maybe we should have left that something well alone, but of course we knew better. And before we are too hard on ourselves, we should think about our different attitudes to life back then. We felt great nearly every day, unless our parents were doing our heads in. We had limitless reserves of energy. We were never going to slowly transform over time into that old person on the bus, by God. We were never going to get old, lose control of our bladders and piss in our pants. Not us. So to think that we could be dragged down in any meaningful way by something as small and harmless as a cigarette or 5 was utter nonsense, and of course this is how it got us. Time went by as it does, and we went about our lives, sometimes having a bad time, sometimes good, but all with a cigarette in our hand, or tucked in our pocket within easy reach. And for the first few years or so it can be relaxing and enjoyable, like when you are awake late at night by yourself and there was a good movie on, or when you were having a get-together with your pals, laughing and joking. But it always becomes that stinking thing that is holding us back, wasting our cash and draining our stamina and strength. That's when "I'm not so certain about this smoking business" thoughts start to creep in. But by the time we get these, it's usually gotten miles under the radar. Damn it. Why didn't anyone tell me about this? We moan, knowing full well as we exhale this useless hot air that quite a few people told us, and we told them to mind their own beeswax. Enjoy the sweats, cravings and mood swings, that'll teach us. Part 15. The good parts about stopping. Whenever the subject of stopping smoking is thought about, talked about, read or written about, the mind always goes to the harsher aspects of the subject, how difficult it's going to be and how long your cravings are going to last and what not. But the flip side to this smoky coin that a lot of people forget about is how amazing they're going to feel after the first week or so of annoying cravings have passed. Your whole body and to some extent your mind has been weighed down, in most cases for a few years at least, by this fog of chemicals, and when this fog starts to lift you really do feel stronger, springier, healthier and younger. Most people who manage to stick to stopping find themselves going back to an old sport or finding a new one. I got back into running and boxing when I stopped, and I can honestly say it was easy and enjoyable to reach a good level of fitness, because I was no longer struggling against my own body. And once I had achieved this state, the thought of going back to smoking was laughable. Just below I have laid out the timeline and the good changes your body will go through the longer you have stopped, and the more distance you put between yourself and cigarettes. 1. Just 20 minutes after stopping, your blood pressure and pulse rate will return to normal. 2. Just 8 hours after stopping, the remaining nicotine in your will have fallen to about 7% of normal daily levels. That's a drop of around 93%. 3. 12 hours after stopping, the oxygen levels in your blood will have shot back up to normal, so you won't get so out of breath doing medium difficulty physical activity. 4. 48 hours after stopping, damaged nerve endings are beginning to regrow and your sense of smell and taste will be returning to normal. 5. 72 hours after stopping and your body will be completely nicotine-free and your lung bronchial tubes are beginning to relax, breathing is becoming easier and your lungs capacity is beginning to increase. Basically you are getting stronger. 6. 10 days after stopping, you should only be getting 2 or 3 times a day when you think about smoking, and they will be far less insistent, Also your lung strength and stamina will be continuing to rise. 7. 2 weeks to 2 months after stopping, your risk of heart attack has dropped greatly. Bonus, and your circulation keeps improving. 8. And lastly, 2 months to 8 months after stopping, your cilia have regrown in your lungs, which increases their ability to clean themselves and reduce infections, and your body's energy has greatly increased. Once you have made it this far, you can give yourself a big, smug slap on the back, and if you start again after this long, you should slap yourself right across the face. Visit www.letsgetsmokefree.com to learn more. Part 16. Why people keep smoking when they no longer want to. Using tobacco over a long period of time alters your brain's chemistry and takes over your body's pleasure system, your endorphins. This creates a situation where you require an outside action, smoking in this case, to release your endorphins and put you in a better mood. Smoking also becomes what psychologists call an overlearned behavior. Like walking or driving, this is any behavior that we do so much that our body can basically do it with very little mental effort, while our minds think about other more important matters. Another major reason people keep smoking long after they are sick of it and know they really should stop, is who they spend time with. Being around people that still smoke is a very bad idea if you are trying to quit. Even smelling the smoke or seeing the other person smoking, who probably isn't enjoying it anyway, can be more than enough to make the animal part of your brain start craving a cigarette. Also, over time the nicotine receptors in your brain become desensitized, so what used to give you a good relaxing feeling in the first 6 months to a year of starting smoking no longer does, and you are just going through an overlearned robotic behavior. It's a plus point for you to be able to consciously recognize this in yourself, because this should make you feel all the more ready to stop. Being aware of outside influences doesn't just extend to other smokers. Smoking has been portrayed in movies and media as being beyond cool since way back when. This is of course utter nonsense, but being subtly exposed to a theme over time, coming from many different sources, can have a very powerful effect on what we perceive as reality. The reality is far removed, however. Anyone has the ability or even the survival instinct to see that there's nothing cool about dying 20 years before you were supposed to, gasping for breath like a beached trout. And even by reading this ebook and slightly raising your awareness will have the positive effect of destroying this harmful illusion. Part 17. Never again. A huge hurdle for many ex-smokers is teaching themselves not to automatically lunge for a cigarette as soon as something annoys or upsets them. Below I have included a few methods that can help you stay stopped for good. 1. If you are using anything to replace cigarettes, chewing gum, nicotine patches or inhaler, you should keep them handy at all times so you don't get caught out by a craving. 2. As we discussed in the last section, stay away from other smokers, or if it's someone you absolutely must be around, let them know you are in the process of quitting and ask them to keep their smoking way away from you. 3. Avoid drinking any alcohol, especially in the first 2 months of stopping, as this will lower your self-restraint and you'll be back to 20 a day again before you can say asthma. 4. If something pops up during the course of your day that particularly twists your tits, hit the pause button and remove yourself physically and mentally from the situation. Go for a quick walk, or even go to the bathroom and do some deep breathing exercises to get yourself calm again. And the longer you've stopped for, the weaker this trigger will become. Things will still annoy you obviously, but the process will stop going. Annoyed smoke better, and change to annoyed walk better. 5. Get into the habit of distracting yourself from cravings, like going for a walk as mentioned above, and the more time distance you put between yourself and smoking, the weaker your cravings will become, and it will be far less likely that you'll fall victim to them. And just as smoking when you are upset or bored is an overlearned behavior, this will also become true of your replacement behaviors, so much so that within a few months of stopping you won't have to consciously make yourself go for a walk when something annoys you or you get a slight craving. You'll just do it on autopilot. This should be the stage you're aiming for when you first quit, because once you achieve this you will have broken the old negative behavior pattern. Visit www.letsgetsmokefree.com to find out more. Part 18. Time's on your side, or is it? You need to be aware of the animal part of your brain, the part that wants everything now, playing tricks on you after you've been stopped for a while. Sometimes people who have been stopped for a while forget about how stinking, unhealthy and physically restrictive smoking was and start to remember it in a nostalgic way. Yes, of course there will be times in our pasts when we were smoking and having a better laugh or time than we are today, but don't get it twisted and think that the better time was created just because you were smoking. Imagine for a moment that you lived in a universe where tobacco had never been discovered and turned into cigarettes, or it never even grew at all. You still would have had all the exact same good times without cigarettes. The part of you that wants everything now will whisper almost any nonsense into your ear dressed up as reasonable wisdom to get what it wants, but ultimately it is a self-destructive moron, and you are or should be in control of it, not the other way around. It is also a good idea to be aware of different triggers that could make you want to smoke again. These triggers may take the form of going somewhere you haven't been or spending time with someone you haven't seen since you stopped smoking. People, locations and things can act as triggers, and you may find cravings sneaking up on you. A trigger to be aware of is also everyone's favorite worry topic and is also apparently the answer to 99 out of 100 questions. What a build-up. Money. Lots of people get stressed when the bills are due, and it's at times like this that you could find yourself thinking about smoking more. The best defense you have against your own personal triggers is to be aware of them before they happen and have a planned response already in place, which you can carry out as soon as one of your triggers pops up and tries to throw a spanner in your good work. We discussed this in a previous section. Going for a walk or deep breathing exercises, or even finding a quiet spot and pushing out 30 press-ups, whatever works for you. The important point here is that you are aware of and are ready for your triggers. Final thoughts. The main thing I would encourage you to take away from this ebook is that it's better to work smart than to work hard. Stopping smoking obviously takes some mental effort on your part, but it doesn't have to be anywhere near as difficult as we are always led to believe. And with a little knowledge and a few simple techniques, practiced daily, you can seriously remove the venom from your cravings and from your lungs. Thanks for reading. Have a look at these great quit smoking guides. Self-hypnosis Stop Smoking MP3 download. PermaQuit. Or to learn more about NLP and hypnosis for overcoming unwanted habits, visit www.letsgetsmokefree.com. Bypass your cravings to stop smoking. Introduction. Hello and welcome to this free ebook all about stopping smoking, getting past your cravings as easily as possible and staying well clear of smoking once you have stopped. I have condensed and included a lot of useful information and proven techniques to help you quit with as little mood swinging and sweating as possible. Enjoy. Part 1. How hard is it to stop? How hard is it to stop smoking? Is a question nearly every smoker asks themselves after they've been smoking for a few years and the novelty's worn off. In fact, we usually enjoy it the most when we are teenagers and not allowed to. But when the not allowed to phase passes and no one gives a toss anymore whether we smoke or not, then most of us see it as a habit that's holding us back, both physically and financially. But just like everything else that's bad for us and negative, it can be removed from our lives, with a little know-how, and the fact that you are even reading this means you're already over halfway there because you want to stop. And once you've stopped smoking, you'll be able to throw the window open and take in all those smells you couldn't before: petrol, dog shit, and other people's smoke. One of the best things you can do to get rid of cigarettes for good is to be harsh with yourself and say, I'm going to feel tense and irritated and generally not quite myself for the next 2 to 4 weeks. This is of course a bad way to feel, and why would anyone self-impose this? The smoker inside you will ask, and the best answer I can think of is that feeling irritated for weeks is a million times better than developing one or more of the medical nasties that no one in their right mind wants to get. I'm 31 and I stopped smoking 6 years ago. It wasn't easy, and for the first week or so you're having an almost constant argument with yourself about whether to have a cigarette or not. This is just the nicotine trying to trick you, and you will actually notice when this starts to ease off. As soon as it does, you will realize that this is actually doable and you will feel instantly better about deciding to stop. Also, if you use even one or two of the techniques covered in this ebook, your cravings will have their sting removed. Once you have stopped for about 2 or 3 months, you'll wonder why you ever smoked in the first place. This is a great stage to be at because you've pretty much beaten it. One last thing that you need to fully understand is that you need to avoid all alcohol in your first 2 months of stopping. Indeed, avoid any situation where you'll be drinking and surrounded by smokers, because 2 things will happen. 1, they will offer you cigarettes. 2, some of them will make fun of you for stopping because you stopping highlights their inability to. You don't need either of these things when you're trying to get past the first few weeks, or indeed the first 2 months. So to recap, it is difficult at first, but if you stick to it you will basically become a stronger, healthier version of yourself, and you'll have more money. Visit www.letsgetsmokefree.com to learn more. Part 2. Take it or leave it. It will help you to stop if you figure out what kind of smoker you are. There are 6 types for you to choose from, so have a look through the information below to help you come to a decision. 1. Part-time/social smoker. Hardly anyone falls into this category, although lots of smokers wish they did, or tell themselves they do. However, if you are in this category, you may feel that your part-time smoking poses no serious harm to you or anyone else. You could be overlooking warning signs that your occasional smoking is turning into a habit, especially if you tend to smoke a little more when you are stressed or socializing, because that's one of cigarettes' sneakiest tricks. We constantly underestimate it because it's small and it's quick, but a 2 or 3 a day habit can easily warp into a 6 or 8 a day one. And all it really takes to get the upper hand on you is a few extra days of stress or parties, which can pop up at any time. If you're a part-time social smoker, you might as well do a quick swap to a non-smoker to save yourself a harder time quitting later on. 2. The smoker who can stop anytime. Except now. This one's all too familiar, and most of us who have smoked or still smoke will land at least halfway into this category, if not all the way in it. The thought process behind this one is a perfect example of the way a person can distort logic to be able to keep doing what he or she wants to do. It goes something like this: I'll just finish this last packet, then I'll stop, or the famous I'll stop tomorrow, or even I'll keep smoking just now but I'll stop at New Year. And while reading it sounds a little bit funny because we can see the obvious self-deception, it is actually very dangerous, because most people who get into the habit of appeasing their more sensible side with this bullshit end up still smoking 2, 3 or even 10 years down the line. And only stop when they've considerably weakened themselves and burned heaps of money. Yes, this one is a long wait for a train that isn't coming. 3. The emotional smoker. For those of us that have more extreme shifts in mood, for whatever reason, dealing with nicotine withdrawal can be all the more difficult, because what for someone else is a slight downer can seem to you like a plummeting spiral. The flip side of this is that once you do get free of the withdrawal stages, you'll feel much better about your accomplishment. And let's face it, if you know you're going to be having strong mood shifts, it's better to behave in a way that creates really good moods as opposed to really bad ones. If you think you are this type of smoker, you probably smoke to avoid negative feelings, situations and arguments. For you, smoking has become something to run to when things are happening that you either don't like or have no control over. The challenge for you is to become comfortable with yourself when you're not smoking, And also you have to ask yourself if being around something or someone is so annoying to me that it forces me to want to smoke, is it really worth being around that? I would guess the answer to this question would be a big fat no. Take it or leave it, part 2. 4. The smoker who worries about weight gain. If you are a smoker who is afraid of putting on weight, you are probably using cigarettes some of the time at least,